Hello, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. Today, I'm very excited because I have a very favorite person in house as my guest. Let's welcome her, and I will introduce her later to you because she has a whole list of accomplishments. Let's welcome Stephanie Campbell. Hello, how are you doing?
Hello, it's so good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm so pleased and honored because you have done extensive work as volunteer, as board director, as a social worker, and you are one of the key voices on gender equality from Australia. So I do believe you have a lot of work and you're always traveling, but thank you so much for giving me this time.
It's my absolute pleasure. It's a delight to be here.
As a fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and influential members of the Canberra community, you continue to drive social changes in both the corporate and the social setting. I would like you to take us back to the 20-year-old Steph. What were her thoughts, what she wanted to become, and what was the path that actually led her to work in this very important woman agenda?
Yeah. Well, when I was 20 or a little bit older, I was studying international relations. I was actually in the UK and was studying at Cambridge. I had grown up in the United States on Alaska, so had actually never been to Australia or any really parts of Asia. So I was very new to international relations and travel. But at Cambridge, I like to say I studied both the theory and the practice of international relations. And I met my husband, who's Australian, and we ended up together, and I moved to Australia. And very quickly, I became interested in our region, in the Pacific, and in international development. And of course, Australia has many neighbors that are developing countries, and their development is so incredibly important to Australia's security and prosperity, and that partnership and that relationship in development, and including in Australia's ongoing efforts at economic growth and prosperity for all of our people. And so understanding that, I became very interested in international development and started a career, about now 30 years ago, with our international development agency, which was called 𝐂𝐲𝐻𝑆. It's now part of DFAT now. And that led me to a career not only in development, but later in business. But it also led me to a realization as I was working in many countries around the Pacific and in Southeast Asia, and indeed as I was working in Australia, that if I wanted to achieve any of my goals, I couldn't do it unless I ensured that every single person had every single opportunity to meet their full potential. And when that wasn't happening, we were really unable, either as an individual trying to accomplish something in terms of my own goals, or as part of an organization, or indeed a country plan, that there was absolutely no way we were going to succeed the way we wanted to succeed unless everyone was involved. Whilst I'm sitting here talking to you about aspects of gender equality, I've never really studied gender equality. I've never been a consultant in gender equality, but I have learned through a very long career that if you want to get anything done, if you want prosperity and maximize prosperity for a community or a nation or the world, you're not going to be able to do that unless everyone can bring their lived experience and barriers are removed for everyone.
Thank you, Steph, for sharing this with us. And your lifelong commitment to international development and gender equality has not only shaped policy, but it also has transformed millions of lives. And if you could just tell us one story that you just look back and feel very proud of.
Yeah. So I worked in Papua New Guinea. I still work in Papua New Guinea for many, many years. And PNG has come a long way and is really committed at all levels of community and society and government of recognizing, like Australia is also recognizing, and most other countries in the world, that violence against women and girls was a huge barrier to, again, every aspect of their society. It affected getting children into schools. It affected hospitals. It affected how their police could operate. It affected ensuring happier families. It affected their economy, et cetera, peace and stability. But at the time I was working in PNG, we had a lot of goodwill and community effort, but there was no formal case management services for those who were experiencing violence to basically be able to sit down with someone and work through how they wanted to take forward their journey in terms of identifying their challenges with violence and also coming up with solutions, which is a really important aspect of supporting survivors in this space. So a few of us sat down and thought, well, this isn't good enough. And together we came up with an idea of how we could establish PNG's first ever formal case management service. And there was really leading amazing Papua New Guinean people also leading the way here, as well as one of our universities in Australia, 𝐴NU. And together we designed a new NGO called Family PNG. And a few of us went around rattling the can for a bit of money. Australian government at the time, through our then foreign minister, agreed to give us $3 million to kick it off. And we kicked off again PNG's first ever case management services. We've just celebrated 11 years. And if you fast forward, we're now working across PNG. We now have formal case management services in 3 provinces, but we do training across many provinces in PNG. We're working to implement a best practice model of a safe house. And we're also now working with private sector on the first ever public-private partnership to address family violence. So I'm really proud that I've been able to support a community effort to look at identifying solutions within a community based on their own definition of the problem, and to come up with culturally safe and appropriate case management and safe house services for those in Papua New Guinea experiencing family and sexual violence. And I think it's a great model of partnership and a great model how working together you can really get things done. So I feel very proud of my contribution to that amazing organization.
That's amazing, Steph. And honestly, this is very unfortunate that females in some part of the world, like because I come from a third world country, it's not developed. There's a lot of economic pressure. There are other challenges also, but still, gender-based violence and especially violence against women is still part of the first world problem also. And because you travel a lot and you meet, and you went to Afghanistan also, that was very brave move. And I'm sure you have also visited such other countries and areas which are not easy for a woman to go and talk about gender equality. And do you think that gender based violence is still very common and there we need to take measures? And if yes, what are the top 2 things that you think it is right time to demand from the governments and also from the other private sector companies and NGOs also? Is there any help that companies can provide when they know one of their staff member is beaten at home?
Yep.
What is your general idea of
Big
this?
question, but let me just start with there's not one country in the world, not mine, not yours, not some of the countries that we think might be progressing a bit more on this, that is free from violence against women and girls. And I say violence against women and girls because I should say men and boys also experience family, sexual, domestic violence, but it's predominantly an issue that affects women and girls, so we tend to focus on that. My country, 1 out of 4 women experience violence. Those rates are not moving quickly in the right direction, and we again are looking at what we do about this. I mean, we are really deeply concerned about domestic violence, homicides, where that leads to women actually being murdered, and again, that numbers not going in the right direction. So I think when we look at this as an issue, this is an issue that affects every single country, and we have to start at home to address it and then work together to address it throughout the world. So that's the first thing. It's really, a tricky one to say, how do you solve this issue? Because it's so complex and it's so multifaceted. But I think a few things that we've learned over the years, and I think we need to continue to really focus on. 1, you have to look at the whole gambit of issues around and why women and men, but largely women and girls, are experiencing violence. And it's not just one problem or one issue. It has to do back, to social norms and even cross-cutting social norms across all of our countries on how women are expected to take care women are expected to take charge, how we raise our children, both boys and girls, about what we expect of boys and what we expect of girls, and how they carry those into adulthood in terms of what men might think. This is what makes a man, being tough, expecting to kind of lead the way and charge the way, whereas women might be expecting they need to follow through. They need their caretakers, and that might put women in a position where they may be more likely to experience violence, and men in a position where they may feel violence is part of how they are geared to be men. So it's also about, how we educate our children, the values in which they are exposed to, what they're exposed to online, for example, and the number of children that access information online. It's about, how we experience issues like economic challenges or what happens in our own families in terms of violence. There's just so many aspects to it. There's not one simple answer. But there's a few things we have learned. And one is, when you're tackling violence, you need to park the ambulance both at the top of the cliff and the bottom of the cliff. By that, I mean we have to look at how we respond, because that's important and it's going to continue to be important, but also how we're working to prevent violence. And in that, and both need to be looked at together. And in that prevention of violence, it's really, really critical that we include men and boys, and we include them part of the solution. And how are we engaging, for example, with boys and with men at every point that we can? How are we engaging them on not only their values and their actions, but a deep understanding of when there's not violence in the home, they're going to be much happier. They're going to be more successful. They're going to be able to meet their own goals much more effectively. And so I think that ability to engage men and boys, I think we need to do that much better. Our ability to look at this as a complex issue with many different mechanisms needed to address it, and connecting those points between prevention as well as response are really, really essential. And in all that, ensuring that we're going and working with individuals experiencing violence, working with perpetrators who are perpetrating violence, working with families, working with communities, ensuring that our children are free from intergenerational trauma from violence and can lead lives free of violence. That in doing that, we're always putting the survivor in the middle, and taking a trauma-informed, culturally safe, client-centered approach. And that instead of coming in and telling people this is what we're going to do to them, we're deeply listening and working alongside them to help them, again, to identify the challenges that they're experiencing and come up with the solutions that are going to work best for them.
I agree with you, Steph. It is right time for us to include boys in this awareness, so that when they become man, and they do not think that hitting someone is manly and this is what makes them a man, because I think we need to tell them that there is no way they can hit a woman just because they're frustrated, they have some pressure, or for any reason. There should be no reason for any kind of violence. So I believe it has to start from the bottom and it has to go up. And again, the government has to do their job and the legislation has to do their job.
Back to the private sector. So I just remembered you'd asked me about that as well. I think the private sector has a really significant role to play in this space, and they're actually quite a sleeping giant in terms of how we can really respond to violence. And there's many layers to that. I mean, first of all, the private sector has employees and they have a captured audience within that. And you think of the number of employees in the private sector, we're talking about millions and millions and millions of people around the world. If you just look at those really major big companies, there's millions of employees. And when you have this captured audience that comes to work that has to abide by certain values and rules within an organization, you do have the ability to have no tolerance to violence, both in the home and in the workforce. You have, importantly, the ability to educate and to, as we were talking about before, sharing kind of why violence is so difficult for communities, for happy families, and for the workplace. And there's a lot of work now to actually put a cost on violence to workplaces in terms of employees not being able to come to work, to stay at work, to focus at work, to perform at work because of all of the trauma they might be experiencing in their personal lives. So there's all sorts of issues that when you have this captivated audience, you can work with, from, executive management right down to your employees, on why violence is really not a good idea. And then these employees, if you have millions of employees in the workforce, they're connected to communities. So how are you inspiring and encouraging them to go back into communities and to be able to engage with their own communities on these anti-violent messages? Then, of course, companies have supply chains where they tap into a lot of other mechanisms, and they are people and structures. And they also have the ability to do a lot of work through advertising and their various ways in which they're engaging the consumer and the customer that can also help to tackle some of these issues by changing, for example, norms around what we expect women to do and what we expect men to do, having anti-violent messages as well. And then companies do have funding as well, so they can fund services, prevention work, etc., as well as government can. So I think all of those reasons, if we bring that together in a strategy, the private sector is a very powerful player in this space and untapped in many ways.
That's right. I also agree, because private sector has more manpower, PR strategies, so they can completely change the narratives. They can make examples, and they can set precedents by helping their own employees, and the colleagues can share the message across. So I believe the resources they can utilize in the right direction for awareness, advocacy, and action. And this will change a lot of things. You have worked across some of the very complex systems, which are from foreign aid and diplomacy to development and community engagement. And this is a very complex system. Each field is very diverse. And what keeps you motivated at this large scale when you're working? And have you managed to stay connected the people at the heart of the work?
Yeah. I mean, staying connected to the people at the heart of the work is what motivates me. So I, in fact, am really returning to that now in my career. So I finished up as Australia's ambassador for gender equality recently, and I've gone back to really reconnect with social work, where I'm going back working directly with individuals and communities. I've had the absolute privilege of doing some work in Aboriginal communities in Northern Australia, working with the Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Authority, which is just amazing because it's such a culturally safe environment, but it also enables me to work one-on-one with families, with people, with communities, and I'm really loving that. But I'm also about to launch my own coaching business as well, where I'm just going to do a bit of both professional and personal coaching. So in addition to having a master's in social work, I also have a diploma in professional and executive coaching and leadership. So I'm going to return and doing a bit of work in that, also just pro bono as well to some extent. So I'm looking forward to getting back into just those direct people-to-people connections, because I do believe that it's easy as you move through your career and you move up into more senior roles and you're leading organizations or you're doing board work or etc., you can become quite separated from that person that ultimately you're trying to serve, or that community. And that connection, when it's broken, is not informing policy the way in which policy can be most responsive to those that it's developed for. And so I strongly feel that what I might be doing in Australia, working in remote communities, or what I continue to do going to PNG or working with some of my coaching clients, etc., if I'm then using that to inform government policy and strategy and business policy and strategy in a way that really matters, I think that's really important. So it is that user at the ultimate end of our services are those really inspirational people I've met within community after community after community. I have so many stories of women and men who've just absolutely inspired me by, just everyday heroes out there that I've met time and time again, that they blow my mind on what they've done and what they've accomplished. That really keeps me going every single day, as does our younger generation and, their hope for the future as well. I'm always so inspired when I meet younger people and what they're doing to contribute to a better world. And, I think at the moment there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of instability, there's a lot of concerns. But the one thing that drives me forward every single day is the fact that in all of my travels, and when I was ambassador, I did 55 country visits in 2 years. So I did a huge amount of travel, met people from all over the world. And there are definitely more people out there that want a world that is safe. They want to give love and receive love. They want their children to grow up happy and healthy. They don't, they want to be able to go to the store and afford the basic things and have an environment which enables that to happen. And they're just really good, decent people. And there's more people out there that want the same things that we want than not. And I think recently, through a lot of, disinformation and probably debates that aren't helpful, we've lost focus on what we mean by a lot of these things anyway. For example, gender equality, it's just become such a term that people kind of react to in a negative way. But for me, and maybe we just need another term now because maybe we've lost the narrative on it. For me, and what I've always believed in and why I'm passionate about this, and I said it earlier, gender equality is nothing more than every single person has every single opportunity to meet their full potential, regardless of who they are. And our job, as maybe policymakers or officials or, in business, if we're working on this through a philanthropic point of view, is to lift barriers so that people can meet their full potential. And we do find more often than not, women and girls will face greater barriers than men and boys. Not always. I mean, you look at the mental health space, I often say this, and I do feel if we look at that, you'll see men and boys for some of those same social norms we were talking about. Anna, don't be such a sissy. Those will create greater barriers for men and boys accessing mental health services, for example. And so if we're looking at gender equality and lifting barriers, we need to lift those barriers for men and boys. So it's about everyone, not just women and girls, but it's really been equated to a few things like it's, women wanting to get ahead and men falling back. That's not what it's about. About, the LGBTQI community. I mean, that's part of it because we need to remove barriers for everyone, but that's a small part of it. It's about all of us. And I think the more we can start focusing on that and not get caught up on, this is work or this is, then we're going to be much better off. So I think it's how do we work together to reset that narrative around, it's basically about equality.
First, I would like to say that you will become a great coach and mentor. I do see that in you and with all your experience. Plus, you are a very kind human being and you have that magnetic charisma. So I'm sure it will be very successful. Please try to save a seat for me also because I also want to somewhere. And for that, learning from the best will really help.
In the near future, I'll set up my website and get that going. So I'll probably one more stint to Northern Territory. I'm going back in January, and then around April, I'll launch my new business in this. But again, it will be a combination of probably pro bono work and other ways that I can continue to support individuals and communities so that we can all, again, reach our full potential for a really better world to collectively address our challenges.
I do see from this conversation that whatever you work, the main thing that remains consistent is your career, your work, and your deep commitment to the empowerment of women and girls. No matter what you do, it somehow comes back, circle back, and links to the empowerment of women and girls. What do you believe is the most powerful lever we have right now to create a meaningful, lasting change in the gender equality space? Overall,
Oh,
globally and
golly.
locally.
Yeah. See, I mean, again, I think, as I was just saying before, I think one of the things that we have to do is get back to the reasons why this is important, right? And to have a shared understanding that, again, this isn't just some work topic that is there to kind of have, women take over the world or whatnot. Or leave men and boys behind. It's fundamentally essential for our security, both, that hardcore security we don't tend to think about. But when we can enable everyone to bring their lived experience to the table, for example, the decision-making table, then we're reflecting best the needs of everyone in society. I often give this example that I'm runner, and I was in my country. I went to one of our cities, Melbourne, and I don't live in Melbourne, so I didn't quite know the area we were in very well. And I asked one of my colleagues, I said, I want to go out for a run. It's not going to quite be light yet. It was winter. I said, is there somewhere I can run safely? He said, oh yeah, if you go here, 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 I run it every day. It's perfectly safe. You'll be fine. Lace up my shoes the next morning, going for a run. And these 3 men were coming out of the casino, and they had been drinking all night, and they were rowdy, and they started catcalling me, and then they were chasing me, and I was really scared, and I ran back to the hotel, and I found this chap during morning tea, and I said, you had perfect intentions of keeping me safe. Like, you're a good person. You didn't want any harm to come to me. Your lived experience is very different to my lived experience. And if you're the only one able, despite your best intentions to, keep everyone safe or to ensure everyone can thrive in business or whatever, if you're the only voice, even though you have good intentions, you're not going to get it right because we have different lived experiences. And again, it's coming back with those really practical examples of this is why this is so important. When women come to the peacemaking table in conflict, they're coming with a perspective of this is what's happening to our children. This is what's happening to our young men who are fighting. This is what's happening in our communities. This is what's breaking down in terms of health services or in terms of food security, because women have a different lived experience. And therefore, when they bring those issues to the peace table, for example, and we keep saying if you bring more women to the peace table, you're going to have a 63% more likely outcome of peace within the next 5 years. People kind of hear those figures, but they don't understand why. What does this mean? It means when women bring those perspectives to the table, men they might want peace, but they just don't have them. So you're not going to have the same likelihood of a positive outcome. And when you start to really break down and understand, yeah, this is good for me as a woman, but it's good for you as a boy, and it's good for you as a man, and it's absolutely essential to your business, and it's absolutely essential to your military to succeed, and it's absolutely essential to, addressing climate threats, etc. If you don't have equality, we're not going to be able to address these really sticky problems and also some of, the non-sticky problems that we're all experiencing and all facing. I mean, how can we have economic security and growth or food security when you're pushing out 50% of your population and the contribution they're going to make? You can't, right? So I think the number one thing we need to do in gender equality is get back to a joint understanding, and we've lost the narrative. I think right now I'm worried we've really lost the narrative of why this is so important for all of us, and try to just get rid of all the jargon, get rid of all the, kind of stuff that makes people uncomfortable, and come back to the basics. If we all want to thrive, everyone needs to be at the table, so to speak. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment, that we have a lot of work to do in that space to reclaim the narrative around why this is so important in really simple and practical ways.
Unfortunately, the narrative around gender equality has changed, and it's drawn to somewhere negative, that we need to start the debate from zero now and then start working and making people understand why this was important. It's not a race or competition with anyone. It's just we are talking about our own right and our own space, because we're living in a time of overlapping global challenges. We have climate change, we have conflict, we have displacement, inequality, war is going on in different countries, and all these things are adding to the miseries of women. First of all, women, and then children. Of course, girls are also part of it.
So they're just and to undercut all of that, we have disinformation, which is kind of fueling it's disrupting our ability to strategically and practically respond to some of those issues.
What do you see if we have to make a decade agenda? What do you see should be the top 2 things to work on in this chaos, and we might be able to make fast progress after all the confusion that is created?
I mean, again, so I think first for me, it's being able to have a conversation about this that's taking us forward, not backwards. And I think collectively we need to figure out how to do that, leveraging all the tools that those who don't want gender equality or who are putting out the wrong kind of information or the disinformation can counter that. So you have a lot of actors who can really effectively use AI or use internet or bots or whatever in a way that can propagate a definition of gender equality that is threatening and creates fear, which it never should, instead of one that says we're all in this together and let's base our understanding of this on logic and sense, right? So we need to find a way to use those tools effectively and to counter some of that disinformation. I just think it's going to be really hard to get very far. And I think in my time, even as ambassador, and now as I look even over the last 5 years, we've gone pretty far backwards as opposed to further forwards, right, on the way in which we're defining and thinking about these issues. Gender equality has become a dirty word in many ways. So it's being removed from international agreements. It's because it's being misdefined. And I think that is really essential that we collectively get back on track on that. I mean, there's no one thing that I can't, it's so multifaceted. There's so many things that need to happen at once. But I do think if you look at every single country in the world, the way in which violence against women is significantly holding, creating barriers, not only holding women and girls back, but holding, societies back, economies back, etc. I think that is such a critical issue that we need to continue to address collectively, which will enable also the next generation of our children that we're raising to have a more positive, non-trauma informed lens on the world. And I do think we need to continue to think through as we move forward. As you've mentioned, there's so many aspects like war, like climate change, that disproportionately affect women and girls in a negative way. And how do we kind of collectively ensure that's not creating more barriers as we're trying to get on top of the existing barriers going forward? But it also comes back to how are we leveraging technology? How are we addressing the care burden? How are we addressing social norms, which are, promoting kind of women in care roles and men in leadership roles, etc. I mean, there's so many different aspects to work on, but I think we need to perhaps start by refocusing on why this is so important. And that's tough at the moment.
The darkest reality is that although we say we are living in modern times, but each day the violence against a woman is increasing. The percentage is increasing. The victims are increasing against women and against girls. And it's very unfortunate. And in my country, the country that I come from, Pakistan, the care is a primary responsibility of a female. And no matter she is a daughter, she's a mother, she's a sister, whatever, she's a wife, whatever role she has to play, care is her divine responsibility that is granted to her when she was born. And she has work responsibilities, she has study responsibility, but she has to do all the work. And the care, I think, and this is also with the Western culture also. The women, they are overburdenized with work responsibilities, with care responsibilities. Nobody is even talking that the work, home chores should be divided. Nobody wants to share the responsibility, but everyone wants to criticize you when you come out and talk about gender equality. I think this is the narrative that we need to change.
That's the narrative. And what you're describing in your country is the case in my country too. Women do, I forgot how many hours it is more every week of unpaid care work than men.
It's more
and
than
that
billion.
Expectation that when the woman stops doing it, she's judged, and she's made to judge herself as well. Whereas the man is I always reflect on being in the workforce, and when the man would go pick up his kids at lunchtime or after school, it's like, oh, isn't he a good dad? When the woman would do it, it's like, oh, there she goes again, right? But at the same time, when women didn't do it, she was also judged. So women, it was always this dilemma that to be a perfect worker and be a really good employee, you needed to be the first one and the last to leave. And to be a perfect mother, you needed to be home with your kids 24 hours, right? So women are constantly feeling pulled and guilty on both ends because we're never there enough of the hours in the day at work, even though we're pretty effective at work, and we're never home enough with the kids anymore. And we're constantly being judged by society, and we're constantly made to judge ourselves on that as well as being, bad at work and a bad mum. So it's how we kind of rebalance some of that in terms of care. But I also have been several times to your very interesting, beautiful country. I I left last time I went really worried about how some of the climate threats are going to really disproportionately affect women who depend on certain crops for income, or the heat kind of
Yeah.
aspects that are increasingly becoming problematic, or pollution aspects, etc. I think there's a lot of challenges that you can see in countries like Pakistan that will increasingly intensify throughout the world, that are where I was really concerned about that disproportionate effect on women and girls. But it was very clear on the climate side how that was starting to really have an impact.
And unfortunately, I do see with the current sitting government and the next government that we can anticipate for the next 10 years, the situation will become even worse. I do see this because we do not have
Yeah,
solutions. We are not doing the right
yeah,
debate because only the right debate can lead the government to a right action and the right policy.
yeah. Yeah, I don't, I can't comment on that. Although I will say I was super impressed by the number of Pakistani women that I met who were just amazing in government and private sector. I mean, there was some just real powerhouse women there that I was so impressed by. So I think
There is no
that's at
lack
least gives you
and
a bit of hope too.
scarcity of passion and hardworking women in
Yeah,
Pakistan. But individual efforts cannot lead you to a bigger goal or a bigger result because these are collective efforts that shape the policies. So probably
yeah,
this is the reason.
yeah,
And Steph,
yeah.
I see that, like in your term as gender equality ambassador, you went to 55 countries tour. Do let me know how that was. And, your career is very demanding. What keeps you grounded through all the complexity, pressure, responsibility? Are there any practices, beliefs that you do secretly inside you and that guide you through the hard days? I'm sure there are hard days.
Yeah, probably not so secret. I mean, I run almost every day. That for me is just the time I can clear my head, get fresh air. So no matter where I was, sometimes if it was really crowded or busy outside, I might have to do it on a treadmill. But in most countries, I was able to go for a run, which was wonderful. I meditate and do bit of yoga. I meditate every day, which is just again that time just to clear my head, and I find that helpful. And then I do a lot of volunteering, which to me is, I mean, I say to people that just fills my cup. So my areas of volunteering, I'm very passionate about Australian wildlife. So when I'm in Australia, I'm a wildlife, I rescue and I rehabilitate Australian wildlife. I specialize in marsupials. So I do things like wallabies, little baby wallabies often. And I also focus a lot on actually microbats, which I love. So, but I'll rescue anything, and I'm really passionate about that because it just makes me feel like it's kind of my bit to the planet as well as to myself. So that's something I do. And I've also over the last few years been doing a lot of volunteer work in palliative care because I just think holistically it's really that end of life journey is so important, and in many ways we get it so wrong, particularly in I would have to say in Australia and other parts of the Western world. It becomes something that's not natural or normal, and it is. And one of the things that I really learned working in many developing countries in the Pacific is just to honor how that's just part of that full life circle, and to celebrate lives well lived, and to have end of lives where you've resolved a lot of the issues you want to resolve. And so I find that, along with grief counseling, a really powerful way to contribute to my own community. I'm increasingly doing more of that as well.
That's really great, Steph. I do see that you're very well connected with the nature also because finding time to go for a run every day, either on treadmill or in nature, is it is itself a commitment because I from past 2 to 3 months I'm also trying to run, but because I'm overweight, it's shameful to say, but I'm overweight and I'm not able to run. So I'm just trying to walk consistent so that I eventually come to running. And I do see and I do sense that you do not have screen time as much as I have or the youngsters like me have. What is your message to us? How can we just cut our screen time and come into the reality? Because we live in fantasy world.
Yeah,
A
I
few
think you
hours.
have to first in everything you do find your why. Like, why do you want to do this? I mean, for me, I've been running since I've been a teenager. So it's, for me, for my why, it's just more that's have time to myself. It's how I can kind of connect with nature. And therefore, it's been really important. And you don't have to run. Walking's perfect. In fact, walking's probably more healthy than running. It's just being out and being able to connect. And so if you don't like to run and you don't want to run, well, just walk. That's perfectly okay. So I think it's finding it's hard to sustain things and to do things unless you have a why to it and a purpose. And I guess with screen time, it doesn't require a lot of us. So we just can turn it on and switch off. And maybe that to some aspects okay as well. I think, for me, one of the things that I've found is I read something really early on in my career, and it really struck me. And it talked about when it looked at your life as like a pie, and when you slice the pie in half, and half of it was devoted to work and half of it was devoted to your family, well, that kind of sounds like a good balance, right? Because you're going to spend life, work, family balance. Except that was terrible, because what would happen is when things weren't going well at work, you'd take it on your family. When things weren't going well with your family, you might overwork. And then by the time you finish work, because work eventually finishes, there wasn't much left, particularly if you just took all the stress out on your family. And so this study had found that it looked at public servants, and it found that people who just had their pie divided in half, after they retired, they only lived 3 to 5 years. And then it looked at people who divided their pie in many. So you'd have, work, which was important, and you'd work hard at work. You had your family that was important, but you also had your community. You had further learning and development. You had a spiritual side that might be, reading philosophy or doing yoga, meditating, or going to church or whatever. There was a spiritual connection. Social and friend groups was also a really important part of that. And when people had those different slices in their pie, not only did they do better at work, they lived much longer after work was over, and they tended to get through hardships much faster and bounce back much faster without getting sick. And that's always stuck with me. And I've always tried to keep my pie sliced in many different directions. And it's true. I found when I do that, it's really enhanced my ability to perform at work, not subtracted from it. And it's also meant if something's not going well, which invariably it won't, there was lots of other pieces that could keep me going, which was really important. So I don't know, I now advocate having as many slices in your pie as possible.
Right. I would like to know that what have you learned about resilience, especially as a woman in leadership navigating high-stake environments? Because you held top
Yeah.
positions yourself.
I mean, for me, resilience is, first of all, finding your power, right? And it's understanding that in any situation, you do have agency and you do have power. You just need to kind of find that and what it is. And, I actually learned that from the hard way. I had a few pretty challenging experiences with violence, actually, and my ability to both respond either physically or my ability to respond through turning someone in or having the law involved and seeing that through or whatever was really important in terms of my feeling that I had power and control over a situation. So I think it's finding in any situation how and where, if you can get control or a bit of power over it. And that might be finding a case management situation or thinking mentally how you're going to not let a certain situation get to you or bother you, or being able to reflect in some cases if you're having a really difficult time at work, for example, this too shall pass, and how am I, if I'm going through hell, I just keep going, right, and you're getting through it. But it's just being able to feel that you're controlling the situation and the situation's not controlling you. To me has been a real key to my resilience. Also, as I said, that ability to find something to just enable me to totally switch off. So I'm not going to bed thinking about it all night long and worrying about it. So for me, when I'm feeding a little baby kangaroo and I have it kind of next to my chest and I have a little bottle in its mouth and I'm looking into its eyes and it's looking into mine and it's saying, "You're my little foster mummy and I really need you." And then my oxytocin's just going like crazy. And all I'm thinking about is this little baby kangaroo and not the 1,000 things that went wrong at work or whatnot. Then that just allowed me to switch off. It's same as when I go running, right? I can just go running and I can get to a space where I'm meditating where all those thoughts, I can just park them for a while. They might come back later, but it's parking them for a while I can just have a break. And then that enables me to then come back and tackle some of the tricky things, and knowing that that space is going to be there again if I need it. that's been really essential to me in terms of resilience and seeing us through hard times, which of course we're all going to have. There's no one that's not going to, if everything's going well today, well, there's going to be a point tomorrow it's not going to be. Like, that's just life. Life has good bits and bad bits and easy bits and hard bits. And it's being able to kind of take advantage of the times when it's a bit easier to catch your breath and think through how you're going to manage those times that aren't tough, because that's just life.
Because that's just life. And I do see that you use your resilience to take care of your own well being, which is really, really important. And what is your relationship to rest, recovery, and even saying no? And what would you like to say to other women also who are in high career, but they are just, they're working, their mind is somewhere else and their body is somewhere else, and they're super, super tired and exhausted?
Yeah. So I think my first message to every single woman, and I do this in every single leadership talk, and that is, when you get on an airplane and the flight host or hostess comes on and says, if there's problems and the oxygen mask drops down, put your own oxygen mask on before you help others. And I say that to everyone, put your own oxygen mask on before you help others, and never, ever apologize for it. Because if you're not breathing, no one else is going to be breathing, right? If you're not taking care of yourself, you can't help and support others. And that's just absolutely important and essential.
Thank you, Steph, for your time, for sharing your life experiences with us, your great work that you're doing for women and girls, and for making us understand that it is really important to have the right conversation, and which will lead us all to the initiatives. We appreciate your work for gender equality. We appreciate your work for the nature that you are doing. And I personally appreciate your work that you do for your own well being. Trust me, I do not do anything for my own well being. I have hundreds of ideas in my mind, and I'm always, always exhausted. There are times when I speak less and cry more because I'm overwhelmed with the emotion. But I got my learning that first I have to put the oxygen mask first for myself, save myself, and then go to others. And this is how it will help. And I do believe that this one conversation is not enough because we have to cover a lot of things, especially the mentorship. I wish you all the best for that. And I look forward to staying in touch. And inshallah, in 2026, early when everybody is back from the New Year holidays, we'll connect again and have a dedicated session for youth, because I believe that you are such a great mentor. And it's really important that you and me talk and try to put some sense.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for making this opportunity happen. I really have enjoyed our conversation.
I hope you like this, because I was nervous about this conversation. Yeah,
Oh, no, that's.
because you're very accomplished. So I was a
Oh,
little nervous also.
I'm sorry that you felt nervous, and I hope that that didn't last for long.
Yes, thank you so much. And inshallah, I'll see you soon. And everybody, please give your feedback and let us know, because we have worked really, really hard to share everything with you. And give us your feedback. This will be very encouraging for us. And I will be back with another amazing guest very soon. Thank you.